Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, and this is something all across the Western world and in Australia as well, is the amount of jobs is declining. There's massive layoffs in Google and Meta and Twitter and Amazon. The list goes on of the big high tech type firms that are laying people off. Microsoft, Cisco laid off 6,000 or 7,000 people. That's a lot to lay off. Some of these things like Meta, I think, laid off 12,000 or so people, and that was only like 5% or something of the workforce. What the fuck do all these people do? So the amount of jobs out there in Australia too is declining, and the government is doing everything it can to ramp up not only net immigration but also backdoor type immigration, such as chain migration and so on. The Australian government recently, very quietly and without anyone noticing, or so I hope, administratively changed the law so that people that came to Australia illegally, but who are trying to claim they're refugees, and so they've been given like temporary sanctuary sort of status, that they'll be moved on to citizenship status, which then allows them to bring out, as nearly all these third world people do, they want to bring out their uncles, aunts and cousins, the whole village to come out. And they do that and bring brides and husbands in from overseas. And now, for typically in the chain migration, for every third world peasant that comes to certainly Australia, they bring an average of 4 people, and these are even ones that have been in refugee camps for years. So, or alleged refugee camp for years. Remember, the United Nations is hardly onerous in their checking. Are you or are you not a refugee? You just need to front up, and that's it. You're accepted as one, no questions asked. A bit like if you change your gender, you just need to assert it. You don't have to prove anything. So, but anyway, but the number of jobs is declining, and importantly, the number of well-paid jobs as a total of proportion is also declining. For example, for a job that pays a salary that's enough to live in one of the big cities of Australia, there's only just slightly under 2% of the total of the jobs pay enough money to live a middle-class lifestyle in one of the big cities. Remember, middle-class lifestyle in the big cities starts at $2.75 to $3 million for a house, and if you've got children as well, and school fees and this sort of thing, you need to put a lot of money on the table to live that sort of lifestyle. So you've either got to have again one of those jobs in the 1.9%, or you need 2 incomes and no children. So this is you need to be in the top 25% of incomes, and both of you need to work without children. And if there's 2 of you if you have children and you want to again live in the middle class life, 2 of you have to be in the top 10% of income earners to be able to manage that. So this is the paucity of jobs. You need to just let that sink in. If you wanted to live on a single income, if you want to live a middle class lifestyle in one of the big cities like Sydney, you need to be in the top 1.9% of income earners to even that's at the entry level to get into that. Now, if you want to get ahead and live sort of comfortably with some surplus, then you're in only 1 in every 270 jobs is paying that. So it just gives you an idea as to just how narrow things, how tight things are there in terms of what jobs. Now, if you're going into the outer, say in the outer ring of suburbs in Sydney, and then into the rural areas, you've got less than 10% of jobs even pay the average wage, and nearly all of those jobs, like as in 90+% of them, are government jobs. Now that brings me back to the of the top paying jobs in Australia. The proportion of jobs, and I've covered this before, that are in the private sector as versus the government. Now, years ago, you'd hardly see any jobs, any government jobs in the top paid jobs. You certainly wouldn't see NGO and charity work type jobs in the top. That's completely changed. For example, here's an NGO that's running a climate change advocacy group. That is one of the best paid jobs in Australia currently. That's one of the best paid jobs in the whole country. A climate change scam gig. I mean, for goodness sakes, real jobs that are creating real wealth and generating real tax revenue, this sort of thing. Those jobs are about 8% of the total. So the best paid jobs in Australia, if you take out government, if you take out the NGOs and the charity sector, or companies that are 100% reliant on government revenues, if you take them out of the equation, you've got 8% of the jobs are actually in the private sector. And the majority of them are in things like banking and finance. So the amount of jobs that are in the productive sector rather than the parasite sector of the economy, 3% perhaps in the best paid jobs. So it just sort of goes to show why would the Western governments, and again, it's all over the West, be hell-bent in the United States, Canada, Britain here, in bringing out masses of third world peasants if there are a declining number of jobs. Now, just coming to the other thing, there's something kind of recent. I've noticed a few pieces floating around the internet. Do migrants steal the jobs of the locals? Now, the propaganda is, no, of course not. They don't. They're all doctors and lawyers, and they're engineers, and they're going to add huge value to the community. They're going to help the community. They're going to make our economy grow because they're bringing all their brilliance. They're 5 million IQs because they've all these third world peasants. They've got IQs way in excess of any white person. So think of all the things they're going to do. Now, in an economy that is growing and where purchasing power, very important here, purchasing power is growing, so the paycheck, the pay rises are outstripping the cost rises, or the cost of living rises, then sure, migration can and does play a good part in that, because it means there are genuine opportunities within the productive sectors of the economy, and that's a good thing. Sure, no reason why migrants can't come out, but the sort of migrant who, for example, in Australia, that used to come out in the 1960s and 70s, you look at the manifests of migrants on some of the migrant ships or planes or whatever they're coming in say, I don't know, the mid to late 1960s. So you look at the average. Or look, pretty much anything. I was looking at a ship a couple of days ago. One of the people coming over, firstly, they were nearly all white or European, they were all Christian. Carpenters, builders, architects, nurses, mechanics, electricians, plumbers. Everybody, pretty much everybody that was coming was qualified. It's not that there weren't labourers that didn't come from rural Greece or rural Italy or something like that, but the vast majority of people, with rare exception, had some sort of qualification, whether it be a trade or something else. They had these qualifications and they were coming in, so they pretty much went straight into jobs. I mean, the average wait from the time somebody put their feet on the ground to the time they got a job in their chosen occupation. They're not going to do taxis or washing dishes or something, get a job in their chosen, like what they're educated in, an architect or something, a plumber or whatever, was under 6 weeks. And Now, the less qualified people may have taken a bit longer, but there are all sorts of facilities to help you. People used to get put up in sort of equivalent of army barracks back then, something that's considered completely unacceptable for third world peasants today. And these were people coming from other first world countries, may have been working class, but nonetheless coming from other first world countries, and they were given free English language lessons. They were given free bus passes to go and attend job interviews. There were people were coming there who spoke Greek or Italian, and helping them go through the interview job application process. And there were all sorts of support services available there, and the people usually got employed very quickly, and there are many opportunities there. So in that sort of circumstance, with the growing economy but growing wages, very important, critically important. Now we're in a different situation where the economy is not growing. It's only growing by the masses of immigration. Otherwise, it's not growing. In fact, if anything, it's going backwards. So the economy is stagnant, if not contracting, and has been, by the way, for quite some time. Also, the economy, the measurements of the economy are a little bit different. As house prices increase, that's treated as economic activity, just the sheer inflation. So there's nothing productive and there's no value added here. It's just the house. The average house price went from, for example, from 500,000 per house to 600,000, and that 20% increase, that's seen as economic activity, which is then look at the economic growth, but it isn't economic growth. Those very artificial means. The productive growth of the economy, the purchasing power of the paycheck, is the only measure of economic growth. If the pay packet purchasing power is declining, there is no economic growth by definition, because it means people don't have more to spend, so they can't be spending their money on consumer goods or buying houses or having more children or things like that. So there is no economic growth there. So that's something that when as the West, the entire Western world now, is that the economy is actually shrinking in real terms, and that any economic growth is really just a smoke and mirrors concoction by using inflation to say that inflation is economic growth rather than actual productive growth. There is no productivity growth there. And so when migrants are brought in from, well, anywhere really, but third world countries, particularly where they are bringing a skill that's needed in the economy, then what's happening in reality is that they are taking the jobs, or the jobs are being invented for them that otherwise wouldn't exist. And therefore, again, that becomes a drag on economic growth, not a plus. For example, the amount of Indians, particular Indians and Pakistanis, that are being employed in the public service, the massively bloated public service. Those jobs now, if the jobs being created for just to get them employed, which is widespread. So there's that, or affirmative action and quotas, race quotas, this sort of thing. They're being given jobs that otherwise would have gone to a qualified white person, or local person, or citizen, existing somebody born here, or whatever. So in reality, they are taking jobs, or they're taking taxpayer money through artificially created jobs. But either way, it's a drag on the economy. So this idea that migrants don't take jobs is nonsense. If it's a highly skilled migrant in a economic sector where there's a shortage of genuine, not a made-up bullshit shortage, but a real shortage, then sure, but bring those people in. I've got no problem with that. Those people do contribute to the economy, but that's not what's happening. We're just having a whole lot of brown and black peasants being shoved into the entire Western world, and they've got nothing to offer. Now, they get employed in places like takeout food shops, but again, the income packaging that I've mentioned many times before means that the local economy doesn't get any taxes from any of that economic activity, so that all they're doing is supplying an affordable service, perhaps in take out chicken or something or other, but that's all. There are other ways of doing this that would be economically more productive, in my view. So that's my concern, that the amount of private sector jobs amongst the best paid jobs are now have almost disappeared. The best paid jobs now are in the government, or in companies that have exclusive contracts with the government, or for NGOs, or for the charity sector. I mean, there's charity sector jobs now that are paying 10 times the average wage, for fuck's sake. It's insane. These are jobs that used to pay really shit money in the past, but over the last 25 years, it's completely reversed. Now, if there is an economy, whether it be Australia or anywhere else, that is unable to produce well-paying private sector jobs, then we're all screwed, because it means the economy's in free fall. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.